Welcome back to Revenge Silent.
At the Easter choir, they removed my name from the list and labeled me as worst voice in the choir. When the mayor commented on the cast, chills ran down everyone's spine. I never thought my life's greatest humiliation would come from the place I'd always felt most at home. For 35 years, I'd been a devoted member of Millfield's Easter choir. It was my sanctuary after losing Richard, my rock, my husband of 40 years. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The spring air felt crisp as I walked into the church basement for rehearsal, my sheet music tucked neatly in my folder. The familiar faces, the smell of coffee brewing in the corner, the scattered chairs arranged in a semicircle. This was my community, my family when I needed them most. Then I saw it. The updated choir roster pinned to the bulletin board. Everyone crowded around, checking positions for the Easter Sunday television broadcast. I waited patiently for my turn, a small smile playing on my lips. I'd always been a reliable contralto, nothing spectacular but steady. Dependable Catherine Marshall, that's what Reverend Phillips always called me. When I finally reached the board, my finger traced down the list, searching for my name between Martin Elizabeth and Peters James. It wasn't there. My heart skipped a beat. Surely a mistake. I scanned again, more carefully this time. That's when I saw it, scrawled at the bottom in Victoria's unmistakable handwriting. Removed. Worst voice in the choir. The room went silent. I could feel eyes on my back, a mixture of pity and discomfort. My daughter-in-law Victoria, our new choir coordinator since January, stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "It's nothing personal, Catherine," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "We have standards to maintain for the television broadcast." My cheeks burned. 35 years of dedication reduced to a public mockery. I clutched my folder tighter, knuckles white, willing the tears not to come. Not here. Not in front of them. I understand, I managed to whisper, though I didn't understand at all. My voice had always been reliable. Had grief for Richard somehow affected my singing without me realizing? Victoria approached, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt more like a claim of victory than comfort. "You're welcome to help with refreshments on Easter Sunday," she offered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I nodded mechanically and turned to leave, ignoring the whispers that followed. Outside, the spring sunshine felt like a mockery of the darkness spreading inside me. 2 days later came the town hall meeting. Mayor Richards was discussing the upcoming Easter festivities that would put our small town on the map. The regional television broadcast would bring attention to Millfield, potentially attracting tourism and business. "We've made some necessary changes to ensure quality," he announced, glancing toward Victoria, who sat in the front row, "particularly with the Easter choir, which will be the centerpiece of our broadcast." Then he looked directly at me, sitting alone in the back row. "Sometimes, difficult decisions must be made. Sentimentality cannot override excellence when the reputation of our town is at stake." A chill ran through the room. Everyone knew who he meant. My humiliation was now public record, endorsed by the highest authority in our community. I walked home alone that evening. The magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. This wasn't just about a choir position. This was the first move in some larger game. Victoria had always been cold toward me, but this calculated public humiliation felt different. Since Richard's passing 6 months ago, Victoria had been inserting herself into every aspect of family decisions. Questions about the will, suggestions that the house was too much for me to manage alone, comments about my forgetfulness to my son Jeffrey. Entering my empty house, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked smaller somehow, diminished. The woman who stared back at me wasn't the Catherine Marshall who'd taught 3rd grade for 30 years. Who'd raised a wonderful son, who'd built a life with Richard that was the envy of many in Millfield. This woman looked defeated. I made my Way to the piano in the living room, Richard's pride and joy. My fingers trembled as I played a simple C major scale and hummed along. My voice sounded as it always had. Perhaps a little rough from crying, but certainly not the worst in the choir. The phone rang, startling me. It was Martha from next door, my oldest friend in Millfield and former opera singer. "Catherine," she said without preamble, "I just heard what happened. That woman is a snake. You come over for tea tomorrow and we'll sort this out." As I hung up, I noticed Victoria's handwriting again, this time on a legal pad she'd left during her last visit. Notes about the house, about Richard's investments, about items she thought should stay in the family, rather than with me. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, I understood. This wasn't about my voice at all. The choir was just the beginning. Victoria wanted me gone, from the choir, from this house, from my son's life. And she was willing to destroy my reputation to do it. I sat down at the piano again, my fingers finding the keys with new purpose. This time when I sang, my voice didn't waver. They had removed my name and labeled me the worst voice in the choir, but they had no idea what I was capable of when backed into a corner. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Martha's Victorian. Home felt like stepping into another era, a time before my world had collapsed twice over. First with Richard's death, now with this public humiliation. Her living room was filled with artifacts from her days on the European opera circuit, signed playbills, ornate music boxes, photographs with renowned maestros. They did what? Martha's voice could still hit a perfect high C when she was angry. At 80, she remained formidable, her silver hair swept into an elegant bun, her posture better than women half her age. I repeated the story, each word still burning my throat. "Worst voice in the choir," Martha scoffed, setting down her teacup. With such force I feared for her fine china. "Ridiculous. I've heard you sing for decades. You're the backbone of that choir's contralto section." "Victoria has everyone convinced I've lost my touch," I replied, staring into my tea. "Maybe grief has affected my voice. Maybe I haven't noticed." Martha silenced me with a look that had once intimidated directors at La Scala. "Stand up," she commanded. "Martha, please, up." She was already moving toward her baby grand piano. "We'll settle this nonsense right now." Reluctantly, I rose as Martha played a warm-up scale. I followed with my voice, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as Martha nodded approvingly. After 20 minutes of exercises and an aria from her teaching days, Martha closed the piano lid decisively. "Just as I suspected. Your voice is richer than before, Catherine. Grief has given it depth, emotion. You're singing better than ever." A weight lifted slightly from my shoulders, but confusion remained. Then why would Victoria— A knock at the front door interrupted us. Martha excused herself, returning moments later with my son Jeffrey. My heart leaped seeing him, then plummeted at his expression. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "Victoria told me what happened with the choir." "Jeffrey, I don't know what's happening. One day I'm in the choir, the next I'm being humiliated publicly." "She's worried about you," he interrupted, not meeting my eyes. "She thinks maybe you're not, coping well since Dad died." My blood ran cold. "Not coping well?" Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria thinks you might be having cognitive issues. She says you've been forgetting things, making mistakes in the choir. She's concerned." Martha made a sound that polite society would call a scoff. "And you believe her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to believe, Mom. Victoria says you've been making financial decisions Dad wouldn't approve of. She mentioned the house maintenance is slipping, that maybe it's too much for you now." I stared at my son, this stranger wearing Jeffrey's face. "I've made no financial decisions without consulting Mr. Bennett, your father's attorney." The house is in perfect condition. You can see for yourself. Victoria thinks. Victoria thinks quite a lot, doesn't she? Martha interjected sharply. Perhaps Victoria should think about minding her own business. After Jeffrey left, promising to check on me more regularly, Martha and I sat in stunned silence. This isn't about the choir, I finally said. No, dear. I don't believe it is. The next morning, I went to the safety deposit box at Millfield Savings and Loan. Richard had always been organized about our affairs. Inside, I found our will, insurance policies, and a letter addressed to me in his handwriting. Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've arranged everything to provide for you, with the house and investments in your name. Provide for Jeffrey, of course, but remember what we discussed about Victoria. Her spending habits concern me. The money comes to her only after you're gone, and only in the trusts we established for the grandchildren's education. All my love, Richard. I sat in the bank's private room, holding the letter. So Victoria knew about the inheritance structure. My removal from the choir wasn't the beginning. It was just the first public move in her campaign. Back home, I noticed things I'd overlooked. The way Victoria had been rearranging furniture during visits, commenting on what should go to Jeffrey someday. How she'd been subtly cataloging our possessions. The questions about my medications, my sleep patterns, my memory problems that didn't exist. She was building a case that I was incompetent. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. 3 choir members stood awkwardly on my porch. Elaine, Thomas, and Diane, friends for over 20 years. We wanted to see how you are, Elaine began uncertainly. I'm fine. Though apparently I have the worst voice in the choir, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. They exchanged glances. Thomas cleared his throat. Catherine, we were shocked by Victoria's decision. It wasn't put to a vote like usual. What do you mean? She simply announced the changes, Diane explained. When Sarah questioned removing you, Victoria said you'd been struggling, missing notes, and that your mental health might be affecting your reliability. My mental health? The pieces clicked further into place. We've been rehearsing the Easter program, Thomas added. Without your contralto, the balance is off in the Bernard piece. Victoria keeps adjusting the arrangement, but it doesn't work. As they left, promising to stay in touch, I called Martha. We're right, I told her, voice shaking with anger rather than fear now. Victoria is trying to paint me as mentally unstable. She wants control of Richard's estate. Then we'll just have to prove her wrong, won't we? Martha replied, starting with that voice of yours. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to Richard's study, a room I'd avoided since his death. His presence felt strongest here, among his books and records. I opened his desk drawer and found his recorder, the one he'd used for choir practice when he'd missed rehearsals. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room, strong and clear, directing the choir through last Easter's program, and there, in the background, the contralto section, my voice, steady and true, hitting every note perfectly. I sat in Richard's chair until dawn, listening to recording after recording. Years of evidence of my musical competence. Years of memories with the community that had now turned its back on me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Victoria had declared war with her public humiliation campaign. It was time to fight back. Take a deep breath from the diaphragm, Martha instructed, her hand firmly pressed against my abdomen. Support from here, not from your throat. For 2 weeks, Martha's living room had become my sanctuary and training ground. Each morning, after Victoria's latest rumor about my deteriorating condition reached me through concerned neighbors, I would arrive at Martha's doorstep, determined to reclaim what had been taken from me. Again, Martha demanded, striking a chord on her piano. This time with intention, Catherine. Sing like you mean it. I drew a deep breath and let the note flow, surprised by the richness that emerged. Grief had indeed transformed my voice, but not in the way Victoria had claimed. There was a depth there, an emotional texture that hadn't existed before. Magnificent, Martha nodded approvingly. Richard would be proud. The mention of his name no longer brought immediate tears, but a bittersweet warmth. He always believed in me more than I believed in myself. As he should have, Martha replied, closing her music book. Now, tell me about yesterday's choir rehearsal. What did your spies report? I smiled at her choice of words. Thomas had been calling me after each rehearsal, keeping me informed of the choir's progress, or lack thereof. The Bernard piece is still giving them trouble. Victoria's moved Elaine to contralto, but she's struggling with the lower register. I couldn't help feeling a small satisfaction. Thomas says Victoria's getting increasingly frustrated. Martha's eyes sparkled mischievously. Good. Let her stew in her own incompetence. As we sipped tea afterward, Martha studied me over the rim of her cup. You're stronger now. I can see it in your posture. I nodded. I'm done feeling sorry for myself. Victoria wants my house, my son's trust, maybe even my dignity. But I won't let her take any of it without a fight. That's the spirit, Martha declared. Now, about Easter Sunday. The mayor's announcement yesterday. About the broadcast? Yes, I heard. Mayor Richards had proudly announced that potential investors from the state capitol would be attending the Easter service specifically to hear our renowned choir. The pressure on Victoria was mounting. It's the perfect opportunity, Martha said. If Victoria fails to deliver a flawless performance. The doorbell interrupted us. Martha excused herself and returned moments later with Jeffrey, looking uncomfortable. Mom, he began hesitantly. I wanted to check how you're doing. I'm doing wonderfully, Jeffrey. Martha's been helping me with my singing. Jeffrey shifted nervously. Victoria mentioned you've been fixated on the choir situation. She's worried it's not healthy. I felt a flash of anger but kept my voice steady. Is that what Victoria thinks? That I'm fixated? She found the choir. Recordings in Dad's study. Said you've been playing them over and over. They're my memories, Jeffrey. Your father's voice is on those tapes. He looked pained. I know, Mom. It's just... Victoria thinks maybe the house is affecting you. Too many memories. The implication hung in the air between us. Victoria thinks... I should sell the house, I stated flatly. Jeffrey wouldn't meet my eyes. She thinks a smaller place might be easier to manage, less stressful. And what do you think, Jeffrey? I asked, my heart breaking at how easily my son had been manipulated. I just want what's best for you, Mom. After he left, Martha handed me a glass of something stronger than tea. That woman is a piece of work. She's turning my own son against me, I whispered. Then we need evidence, Martha declared. Concrete proof of her manipulations. The next day, I visited the church office under the pretense of donating flower arrangements for Easter. Reverend Phillips was delighted to see me. Catherine, we've missed you at choir practice. I've missed being there, I replied carefully. I understand the Easter program is coming along nicely. His smile faltered. Well, there have been some challenges. Victoria has made significant changes to the traditional program. Changes? I prompted. She's removed some of the classic pieces. The Bernard composition especially has been difficult without your contralto section. I nodded sympathetically. I have recordings of last year's Easter program. Richard made them during rehearsals. They might help. The Reverend's eyes lit up. That would be tremendous, Catherine. As I left with a promise to bring the recordings, I spotted Victoria entering the church office. Our eyes met briefly, hers narrowing with suspicion. I smiled pleasantly and continued walking. Back home, I began searching for the documents Richard had mentioned in his letter. In his study, behind the collection of first edition Dickens he'd treasured, I found a manila envelope labeled Financial Records, Victoria. Inside were credit card statements, loan applications, and a detailed report from a private investigator. Victoria, it seemed, had a gambling problem and substantial debt when she'd married Jeffrey. Richard, ever protective of his son, had quietly monitored Victoria's spending habits for years. The most damning evidence was a recent document. Victoria had inquired about accessing Jeffrey's trust fund, the one Richard had established with the provision that neither Jeffrey nor Victoria could touch it until their children reached college age. I sat at Richard's desk, the evidence spread before me. Victoria wasn't just after my choir position or my house, she needed money, a lot of it, and quickly. My phone rang, startling me. It was Thomas from the choir. "Catherine," he said urgently. "You need to come to the church. Victoria's completely rearranged the Easter program. The Bernard piece is out entirely. The mayor's furious. He specifically promised it to the investors." "Why would she remove our signature piece?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because without you, we can't perform it properly," Thomas replied. "But Catherine, there's more. Victoria told the mayor your mental health is deteriorating rapidly. She suggested you might need professional evaluation." My hand tightened around the phone. "Did she now?" "Everyone's uncomfortable with how she's handling this. Some of us are thinking of approaching Reverend Phillips." "Not yet," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "Tell me, is the retirement home performance still scheduled for tomorrow?" "Yes, but Victoria's threatening to cancel it. Says the choir isn't ready." "Make sure it happens, Thomas. I'll be there, in the audience." As I hung up, I looked at the evidence in front of me, then at the piano where Richard and I had spent countless evenings. My voice hadn't failed. My mind wasn't slipping. And Victoria had severely underestimated what a woman with nothing left to lose was capable of. Tomorrow would be just the beginning. Sunshine Valley Retirement Home smelled of antiseptic and potpourri, a combination that brought back memories of visiting my mother in her final years. As Martha and I found seats near the back of the common room, I spotted several choir members nervously arranging themselves on the makeshift risers. "Victoria's not here yet," Martha whispered, scanning the room. "Good." The elderly residents filled the chairs in front of us, many with caregivers at their sides. These performances were highlights in their often monotonous days. I recognized several faces: former students, parents of colleagues, neighbors who'd moved here when maintaining homes became too difficult. Thomas caught my eye from the risers and gave a subtle nod. The plan was underway. Reverend Phillips stepped forward to introduce the choir when the door burst open and Victoria swept in, face flushed with anger. "I specifically said we weren't ready," she hissed loud enough for the front row to hear. Reverend Phillips maintained his calm smile. "These good people have been looking forward to our visit for weeks, Victoria. We can't disappoint them." Victoria's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on me. Her eyes narrowed, but she quickly looked away, probably hoping I hadn't noticed her. "Recognition. Fine," she said through clenched teeth. "We'll do the abbreviated program." The performance began with traditional hymns. Even from the back, I could hear the struggle in the contralto section. During the third song, the challenging Bernard piece they'd retained for this audience but planned to cut from Easter, the section faltered completely, voices trailing off in confusion. Victoria, attempting to direct while shooting daggers at Thomas, grew increasingly flustered. The performance was disintegrating before our eyes. Martha squeezed my hand. "Now," she whispered. I stood and quietly made my way toward the side of the risers. Several choir members noticed me, their expressions brightening. When the song ended in an awkward, disjointed cadence, scattered applause filled the room. Before Victoria could announce the next piece, Elaine stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been struggling without our beloved contralto section leader, Catherine Marshall, but I see she's with us today." She extended her hand toward me. "Catherine, would you please help us with the next piece, For old times' sake? A murmur went through the room. Victoria spun around, her face a mask of fury when she saw me approaching the risers. "This is completely inappropriate," she hissed. "Catherine is no longer—" "Oh, let her sing," called out Mrs. Abernathy from the front row, a formidable woman of 90 who had taught both me and Victoria in high school. "I came specifically to hear Catherine's contralto. Been listening to it for 30 years at St. Mark's." Trapped by the audience's expectation, Victoria had no choice but to step aside as I took my place in the contralto section. The familiar weight of belonging settled over me as I stood among friends. We began the Bernard piece again. This time, my voice provided the foundation the others needed, guiding them through the complex harmonies. I felt a power building within me, a certainty that had been missing since Richard's death. When we finished, the applause was thunderous by retirement home standards. Mrs. Abernathy even stood, her gnarled hands clapping with surprising vigor. "That's more like it," she declared. "Now that's the St. Mark's choir I know." Victoria's face was a storm cloud. As the applause continued, someone in the back started recording with their phone. Then another. In our small town, I knew this would be on social media within the hour. After the performance, several residents approached to hug me, to tell me how much they'd missed my voice in the community. I caught sight of Victoria in heated conversation with Reverend Phillips, her gestures becoming increasingly agitated. Martha appeared at my side, grinning like a Cheshire cat. "Well done, my dear. Did you see Victoria's face when you hit that low E perfectly? Priceless." On our way out, Thomas intercepted us. "Catherine, that was magnificent. Several of us are meeting tonight to discuss the situation with Victoria. We'd like you to join us." "I'd be honored," I replied, newfound confidence flowing through me. When I arrived home, I was surprised to find Jeffrey's car in the driveway. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. "Mom," he said, looking up. His expression was conflicted. "I just saw a video of you singing at Sunshine Valley. You were amazing." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "Victoria told me your voice had deteriorated badly, that you were embarrassing yourself in choir." I sat across from him. "And now you—" "No, that's not true." He nodded slowly. "Mr. Finch called me today, too." My heart skipped. Albert Finch had been Richard's closest friend and golf partner for decades. What did he say? "That I should ask you about Dad's private investigation into Victoria before making any decisions about the house." His eyes met mine, questioning. "What investigation, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "Your father had concerns about Victoria's financial situation. He hired someone to look into it before he died." Jeffrey's face paled. "What kind of concerns?" I retrieved the manila envelope from Richard's study and placed it in front of my son. "See for yourself." As Jeffrey read through the documents, his expression shifted from disbelief to anger to profound sadness. "She's been lying to me," he whispered. "About everything." "I'm so sorry, Jeffrey." He looked up, eyes glistening. "She told me you were becoming paranoid, that you were inventing conflicts where there weren't any." He shook his head. "I believed her over my own mother." "She's very convincing," I said gently. "She asked me to talk to Mr. Bennett yesterday about having you psychologically evaluated." His voice broke. "She said it would be for your own protection." The full weight of Victoria's scheme became clear. If she could have me declared incompetent, control of Richard's estate would revert to Jeffrey, whom she could manipulate. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Jeffrey squared his shoulders, looking so much like his father that my heart ached. "First, I'm going to apologize to you properly," he said, taking my hands. "Then I'm going to have a long conversation with my wife." After Jeffrey left, I called Martha to update her. "The tide is turning," she said. "But Victoria won't go down without a fight." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "Because this time I'm ready for her. That evening, as I prepared to meet with the choir members, I received a text from Thomas. Emergency choir meeting called by Victoria tomorrow. Full attendance required. Rumor is she's canceling Easter performance. Mayor furious. I smiled. Victoria was panicking, making rash decisions. And in doing so, she was playing right into my hands. For the first time since they'd removed my name and labeled me worst voice in the choir, I felt truly powerful. Victoria had tried to diminish me, to erase me. Instead, she had awakened something stronger than she could possibly have anticipated. Easter Sunday was approaching, and with it, my resurrection. St. Mark's Fellowship Hall buzzed with tension when I arrived with Martha. The emergency choir meeting called by Victoria had drawn not just choir members, but Reverend Phillips, several church elders, and, most surprisingly, Mayor Richards himself. "Catherine," Thomas whispered as he intercepted us at the door. Victoria's on the warpath. She's threatening to cancel the Easter performance entirely. On what grounds? Martha asked, her voice carrying enough to turn several heads our way. She claims the choir isn't prepared, Thomas replied. But everyone knows it's because the Sunshine Valley performance went viral. Indeed, Mrs. Abernathy's nephew had posted the video online, where it had been shared throughout Millfield's tight-knit community. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, about my voice and the choir's performance, but scathing about my removal. Victoria stood at the front of the room, her perfectly manicured hands gripping a clipboard so tightly her knuckles were white. When she spotted me, her expression hardened into something ugly. "This is a closed meeting for current choir members only," she announced pointedly. "I invited Catherine," Reverend Phillips stated, moving to stand beside me, "as the situation directly concerns her." Victoria's smile was brittle. "With all due respect, Reverend, Catherine's removal from the choir was a necessary musical decision." "Decision you made unilaterally," Elaine spoke up from the choir seats, "without consulting any of us." "I'm the choir coordinator," Victoria snapped. "The musical quality is my responsibility." Mayor Richards cleared his throat. "And yet, the recording from Sunshine Valley suggests Mrs. Marshall's voice is exceptional. I find myself confused about the situation, Mrs. Crawford." Victoria flushed. "One adequate performance doesn't negate weeks of inconsistency." "What inconsistency?" Thomas challenged. "Catherine has been our most reliable contralto for decades." "You haven't heard her private rehearsals," Victoria countered. "Her voice has been deteriorating for months. Richard's death affected her, more deeply than anyone realizes." The room fell silent at the mention of my late husband. Victoria saw her advantage and pressed on. "Catherine has been struggling with grief. It's affected her memory, her reliability. Ask her son. He's concerned about her mental state." I felt a surge of anger, but before I could respond, the fellowship hall door opened. Jeffrey stepped in, his face set in grim determination. "Actually," he said loudly, "I'm not concerned about my mother's mental state. I'm concerned about my wife's honesty." Victoria went pale. "Jeffrey, what are you doing here?" "Supporting my mother," he replied, moving to stand beside me. "Something I should have done from the beginning." The room erupted in murmurs. Victoria's gaze darted between Jeffrey and me, calculation evident in her eyes. "This is inappropriate," she managed. "We're discussing choir business, are we?" Mayor Richards interjected. "Because it sounds like you're making accusations about Catherine's mental health, which strikes me as far beyond a choir coordinator's purview." Victoria's composure cracked further. "I'm only concerned about the Easter broadcast. The investors, the mayor interrupted. "We're particularly looking forward to hearing the Bernard piece that your choir performed beautifully at Sunshine Valley, once Catherine rejoined you." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "We can't reinstate someone based on sentiment. The choir has standards." "Standards that Catherine exceeds," Martha declared loudly. "As an operatic professional, I can attest that her voice is stronger than ever." Victoria's laugh was hollow. An 80-year-old has been vouching for her elderly friend? Hardly objective. A collective gasp went through the room at the insult. Martha drew herself up to her full height, every inch the diva who had once commanded international stages. This has been performed at La Scala longer than you've been alive, Victoria. I know talent when I hear it. Reverend Phillips stepped forward, his gentle manner belying the steel in his voice. Victoria, I believe we should put this to a vote. The choir has always been a democratic institution. A vote? Victoria's voice rose. This isn't a popularity contest. No, Jeffrey said quietly. It's about truth. And the truth is, you removed my mother from the choir for personal reasons that had nothing to do with her voice. Victoria turned on him, desperation evident in her eyes. Jeffrey, you don't understand what's happening here. I understand perfectly, he replied. I've seen the financial reports, Victoria. Dad knew about your gambling debts. The room went deadly silent. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. How dare you bring our private matters into this? She hissed. You made it public when you humiliated my mother to gain control of our family's assets, Jeffrey responded, his voice steady. Is this true? Reverend Phillips asked, his expression troubled. Victoria's eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape. Finding none, she straightened her shoulders. Fine. Take a vote. Reinstate Catherine if you must. But I refuse to direct a choir that ignores basic musical standards for sentimentality. She stared directly at me. Without a director, you have no Easter performance. Actually, Thomas said, stepping forward, the choir constitution states that in the absence of a director, leadership reverts to the senior choir member. All eyes turned to me. That would be Catherine, Elaine confirmed. Victoria laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria to it. You can't be serious. She doesn't have the experience. She has 35 years of experience, Martha interrupted. And she has something you lack entirely, Victoria. The respect of her peers. Reverend Phillips nodded thoughtfully. It seems we have a solution. All in favor of reinstating Catherine Marshall to the choir and appointing her interim director, please raise your hands. The vote was unanimous, excluding Victoria, who stood rigid with fury. This is ridiculous, she spat. You're making a mistake you'll regret on Easter morning. She stormed out, leaving a charged silence in her wake. Mayor Richards approached me, extending his hand. It seems you have quite the challenge ahead, Mrs. Marshall. Easter is only 3 days away. I took his hand, feeling a strange calm settle over me. We'll be ready, Mayor. The Bernard piece will be the centerpiece, as tradition dictates. As the meeting disbanded, Jeffrey pulled me aside, his expression pained. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. You saw what she wanted you to see, I said gently. It's not your fault. What happens now? He asked. I looked around at the choir members gathering their music, at Martha beaming proudly, at the community that had rallied behind me. Now, I said with a confidence I hadn't felt since Richard died, we prepare for Easter, and after that. I met my son's troubled eyes. After that, you and Victoria have some difficult conversations ahead. As we left the church, Martha linked, her arm through mine. You know she's not done yet, she warned. Victoria will make one more desperate move before Easter. I'm counting on it, I replied, surprising myself with how little fear I felt. But this time, I'll be ready. Easter morning dawned with a crystalline clarity that seemed almost deliberate, as if the heavens themselves were setting the stage. I stood in my bedroom, smoothing the lapels of Richard's favorite blue dress, the one he said brought out the silver in my hair and the blue in my eyes. You would have loved this, I whispered to his photograph on the dresser. Your practical, predictable wife, leading a rebellion at 62. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of emergency rehearsals, revised arrangements, and more community support than I could have imagined. Even choir members who had initially stayed silent during my removal had rallied around me, determined to make our Easter performance memorable. Victoria, meanwhile, had been ominously silent. Jeffrey reported she'd hardly been home, coming in late and leaving early, avoiding any meaningful conversation. Martha's warning echoed in my mind. Victoria would make one final desperate move. As I drove to the church for our pre-service rehearsal, I prepared myself for whatever might come. The parking lot was already filling with early attendees and choir members when I arrived. Thomas met me at the side entrance, his expression a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "The sheet music for the Bernard piece is missing." My stomach tightened. "All copies?" He nodded grimly. "Every single one. The master copies from the file cabinet, everyone's individual folders. All gone." "Victoria," I said flatly. "That would be my guess." I took a deep breath, refusing to let panic set in. "It's okay. We know this piece by heart. We've sung it for years." "Without sheet music? For the entire choir?" "We can do this, Thomas," I assured him, projecting more confidence than I felt. "Gather everyone in the choir room, now." The choir room buzzed with tension when I entered. 20 faces turned to me, seeking reassurance I wasn't entirely sure I could provide. "As you've probably heard, our sheet music has gone missing," I began, forcing my voice to remain steady. "This is our final challenge, but it will not defeat us." "But Catherine," Elaine spoke up, "some of our newer members don't know the Bernard piece by memory." "Then those of us who do will guide them," I replied. "We'll perform it as we've always done, together, supporting each other through every measure." Determination replaced worry on their faces. For the next hour, we worked through the piece from memory, those who knew it well paired with those who needed assistance. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, collaborative, and surprisingly powerful. As service time approached, we took our places behind the sanctuary. Through the doorway, I could see the church filled to capacity. Reverend Phillips had mentioned the controversy had actually increased attendance. Nothing drew a crowd in Millfield like the promise of potential drama. The mayor sat in the front row with 3 distinguished-looking visitors, the investors, presumably. And there, in the 3rd row, was Victoria, her face a mask of smug anticipation. Reverend Phillips approached me, his expression concerned. "Catherine, is everything all right? I heard about the missing music." "Everything's fine, Reverend," I assured him. "The choir is ready." His eyes searched mine. "Are you certain? There would be no shame in simplifying the program given the circumstances." "This choir has been the backbone of St. Mark's Easter celebration for 50 years, I said firmly. "We will not falter now." He nodded, patting my shoulder before moving to the pulpit to begin the service. The first hymns went smoothly, our voices blending in the familiar Easter morning greeting. With each successful piece, the choir's confidence grew. When it came time for the Bernard piece, our centerpiece, I gave the starting pitch and a reassuring nod. The opening notes rose clear and pure. We moved through the complex harmonies from memory, each section supporting the others. When we reached the difficult middle passage, I heard a momentary hesitation from the newer members. Maintaining eye contact, I guided them through with subtle gestures and unwavering vocal support. As the final notes of the piece faded, a profound silence fell over the sanctuary. That magical moment when music touches something deeper than mere appreciation. Then applause erupted, startling in a church setting but somehow appropriate. I risked a glance at Victoria. Her face had gone slack with disbelief. This was not the failure she had anticipated. The mayor leaned toward his guests, nodding with evident satisfaction. When the service concluded, Reverend Phillips asked the choir to remain at the front. The congregation, sensing something significant, stayed in their seats. Today, Reverend Phillips began, we witnessed not just a celebration of Easter, but a testament to perseverance and community spirit. Our choir faced unexpected challenges this morning. He paused, his gaze sweeping the congregation. Their sheet music mysteriously disappeared before the service. A murmur ran through the church. All eyes turned to Victoria, who suddenly seemed very interested in her hymnal. Yet under Catherine Marshall's leadership, they delivered one of the most moving performances in St. Mark's history. He continued, "Sometimes we find strength we didn't know we had when faced with adversity." Mayor Richards approached the pulpit, whispering something to Reverend Phillips, who nodded and stepped aside. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, "our guests from the State Arts Council were deeply impressed by today's performance. I'm pleased to announce they've approved our application for a substantial grant to establish a community music program here in Millfield." He turned to me. "And they've specifically requested that Catherine Marshall serve as the program's inaugural director." The applause was thunderous. As it died down, the mayor continued. "Furthermore, in recognition of her 35 years of dedicated service to our community, I'm honoring Catherine with Millfield's Distinguished Citizen Award." Victoria stood abruptly, her face contorted with fury, and pushed her way out of the pew toward the exit. Few noticed her departure amid the continued applause. After the service, well-wishers surrounded me. Jeffrey approached, his eyes shining with pride. "Dad would have loved this," he said, embracing me tightly. "Yes, he would have," I agreed, feeling Richard's presence strongly in that moment. "Victoria's gone," Jeffrey added quietly. "She left during the mayor's announcement. Took her suitcase this morning while I was in the shower." I squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry, Jeffrey." He shook his head. "Don't be. It's better this way. We'll sort things out." Later, Martha pushed through the crowd, her face alight with triumph. "Did you see Victoria's face? Worth every minute of our plotting." As the church emptied, I found myself alone in the sanctuary, sitting in the choir loft where I'd spent so many Sundays. Reverend Phillips joined me, settling into the seat beside mine. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "there's a lesson in all this that goes beyond music." "What's that, Reverend?" "When someone tries to silence your voice, sometimes you discover it's actually stronger than you ever realized." I smiled, thinking of the past few weeks, the humiliation, the struggle, and finally, the redemption. "I never thought I'd say this," I admitted. "But in a strange way, I'm grateful for what Victoria did. She tried to label me as the worst voice in the choir, but instead, she helped me find my true voice." As I drove home that afternoon, the spring sunshine illuminated the familiar streets of Millfield, the town where I'd taught generations of children, where I'd loved and lost Richard, where I'd nearly lost myself. Victoria had sought to diminish me, to erase me from the community that had always been my home. Instead, she had inadvertently pushed me toward a new beginning. Tomorrow, I would start planning the community music program. I would call Jeffrey and make sure he was truly okay. I would thank Martha properly for her unwavering support. But today, I would simply savor the music that still echoed in my heart, stronger and clearer than ever before.